Why are excuses heard so often? Excuses range from relatively small, the dog ate my homework, that's why I couldn't turn my homework in, to very large. I can't live life at all because of XYZ reason. So, an obvious thing to say is that excuses spare our self esteem, they spare our dignity, our pride, and permit us to persist in living in a state of it could be, or it could have been, it should have been, it would have been, instead of facing realities that could humble us and demand difficult personal change. The reasoning behind excuses could probably get a little bit deeper than that, but that's a good place to start in exploring the topic. Meaning, we say that, let's say that I have to, as a student, turn in an assignment. A simple example. An excuse could spare me from the effort of turning in that assignment. Alternatively, an excuse could spare me from, uh, say, a blow to my pride. If maybe it's a test and I do poorly, then I can say, well, it's because I didn't get enough sleep at night, and consequently, I attribute my poor result to something that is external to my character, my intelligence, uh, my personality, in the aspects that I deem to be most pertinent, most important. And stepping on up from there, let's say that a person says that, I can't really do anything at all in life. I can't try to realize any goals of mine. I can't even harbor any serious ambitions and then try to work towards them, whatever it might be, whether it's becoming successful in a given field, making a lot of money, whatever it may be. Here, what seems to be at play is that a person can at least then hold on to their pride, at least can say to him or herself, well, if not for this, and that reason being, again, extraneous to my character, my personality, my intelligence, myself in its essentiality. It could be an environmental factor, it could be a biological factor. Right? There's something off in me biologically, there's something off in the environment out there, there's something wrong with my family that did something to me, with society and such. If not for that, I would have been, or could have been, great. I could have been, and here I can spin things up. I could have been an A-list movie star, not even a B-list or a C-list one, an A-list one. I could have been a billionaire, not even a millionaire, a billionaire. I could have been the leader of my nation, not just a school board member, but the highest leader. Right? So here my fantasy is free to spin up tall tales about what I could have been, should have been, would have been, without ever having to actually do anything at all to advance even a little bit in the direction of success, such as does require hard work and personal change. To say that in response, something typical and seemingly common sense to say would be to cash in those excuses for real results. See that here there is a complexity, that being that if a person is in this state of mind, they are making, even if unconsciously, a calculation that they are better off living with the excuses and with the fantasies of would have been, could have been, should have been, than with no excuses and with the hard realities that then may ensue. Meaning, a person calculates, let's say in question is an aspiring actor or actress. It is preferable for me to not even be on the D list rather than to really try and fall short. Right? Meaning, I would rather be anonymous as an actor or actress and yet say, well, it's because of just some kind of factor that is irrelevant to my talent, to my ability, rather than to try and to not end up on the A list, to not be successful. Right? A person calculates, I would rather be broke or living paycheck to paycheck rather than to really try to become wealthy or financially independent to one's own standards, at least. right? And yet feel that, or be able to say to myself on some level that if not for how society is or how my family raised me, I could have been so wealthy. Right? I could have been so successful. A person prefers then to say that, or to live with their lack of realized goals, right? To have nothing at all to show, rather than to really try and see that the results are modest. Right? It's preferable for me to say, I could have achieved these great things, these big things, but have nothing, rather than to have just a little bit, right? And that's it. So a person makes this calculation, and it's not so easy to say, stop doing that, right? Stop making excuses and pursue something tangible, right? To take an obvious, concrete, aggrandized example, there are so many individuals that completely bow out of life, that say at some or another point, there's something wrong with me on a deep level, on a neurological level, whatever word a person prefers, on a biological level, right? I cannot do anything other than sleep all day, wake up for a little bit, maybe play some games or watch some videos, and then go back to sleep. And that's that. And it's going to be like that. And there's nothing that can change. And there's nobody that can help me. So here a person, unconscious as it likely is, makes the calculation that this state of being, inadequate as it appears to everybody around me, this state of being is preferable to cutting that out, saying, nah, those excuses don't cut it. I'm making that up. Sure, everybody has challenges, but there's generally always a way. If there's a way, there's a way, and there's probably a way. It's preferable for me to remain in this state, in this condition of life, and yet be able to say to myself, if only, if things were different, I could have been this, I could have been that, I could have been a billionaire, a pop star, whatever the case might be. And then a person has their pride and has their fantasies. And that suffices for the individual, because they know, if I were to give up those excuses and start right now from scratch after having lived this way for, could be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what would be the reality? The reality would be that I would have to start off in some extremely entry-level job, making pennies on the dollar. I might be in a very poor physical condition. I would have to face that, right, and start off on the lowest rungs of health, fitness, lifestyle. Right? I might have no relationships to speak of, so I would have to start with a first friend, with a first conversation with somebody. Right? I might have no dating life, no romantic life, so I would have to first do the difficult work of trying to appear physically, socially, personality-wise decent, right? And then try to take a little bit of initiative. Oh, that is so hard. And the results or rewards or returns are so small, at least initially. It's just not worth it. You get the idea? It's just not worth it. It's worth it rather for me to have nothing, right? To lay in bed all day and sleep, and yet have my pride intact, and yet be able to say to myself, if only it could have been, it should have been, it would have been. That is preferable to what I, at least unconsciously, understand would be the alternative, which was the aforementioned, these little tiny things, these little tiny wins. So when then professionals try to help such persons and say, no, stop making excuses, improve your attitude, oftentimes it is effectively impossible. And that would be the reason, because it makes perfect sense from the perspective of the person. It's a cost benefit calculation, implicit and autonomic, meaning kind of unconscious and automatic, as it very likely is. Because if you speak to the person, they'll probably say, no, not at all. I want to be successful. I wish, it's just that I can't, and make up all kinds of things. So what then is there really to say? At the bottom, probably when individuals find themselves down some such dark path in life, nothing short of breakage and radical self-transformation might be the real kind of final, quote-unquote, solution, the deeper solution. And if that does not occur, it does not occur. And so many of us simply spiral off into some or another such side path vis-a-vis the highway of progress and perfection, right? In the human domain and in the domain of vocation, right? Meaning what it is that we are doing. So many of us do spiral off on such paths, never to be seen or heard from again, leaving nothing behind, representing nothing, having nothing, being nobody. And that is what it is. We can merely comment on it for the most part. However, as it concerns kind of more modest, rational prescriptions, what could perhaps, in some cases, make some dent would be to try to convince myself, if I am some such person or somebody else whose well-being I am supervising at least a little bit, to try to convince a person to change the cost-benefit analysis here, right? And try to shift the perspective to where it really does begin to appear to me that even a very, very tiny little bit of something, incredibly difficult as it is to get, is worth indefinitely, incalculably more than all the fantasies in the world. So, for example, we could again tell ourselves or somebody else, let's say that I'm fantasizing of being Superman or Wonder Woman, of being able to fly and being indestructible, whatever the qualities of these cartoon characters are. Right? That's one thing. I'm sitting there visualizing that, fantasizing. Another thing is my real health, which let's say is very poor. Right? I have messed up blood works and I can barely walk and it's difficult for me to breathe and all kinds of issues. What is, strictly logically speaking, worth more? My fantasies of being Superman or Wonder Woman, or a 0.0001% increase in my health? It's the latter, right? I may feel like it's the former because it speaks to my emotions and I can pretend that I'm Superman or Wonder Woman. But in reality, concerning my quality of life, it's the latter. Now, admittedly, concerning my emotional quality of life, it could be the former, because the latter emotionally I may not apprehend, whereas the former I do apprehend. But in reality, concerning my physical objective well-being, it is, as a matter of fact, the latter. It certainly does seem, and we can up that a little bit. Let's say a 1% increase in health to where I can notice it. Let's say being able to breathe better. Let's say losing some weight to where it's easier for me to walk. Now it's pretty clear that that is more valuable than pretending that I'm a superhero or a supervillain, as the case might be. So we see here that some such thought process can be introduced. What is the expression? A bird in hand is better than a bird in the bush, or 10 birds in the bush, meaning a real bird that I have, if I'm hunting for birds, perhaps the analogy is more valuable than birds out there. There can be a whole flock of birds. If I don't have one in my hand, it doesn't count. Right? $1 or other unit of currency that I have is more valuable, more useful than imagining that I have $1 billion. Obviously, right? I have 1 cent. Maybe I can't do much with a cent, but it's still more concretely and actually speaking than imagining $1 billion. So we can try to change our way of thinking to really attaching value and importance to every little millimeter of actual progress that I personally sustain. Right? Every little inch or millimeter, whatever we prefer, every little bit that I travel in the direction of something actual has indefinitely more worth than all kinds of fantasies. Right? I have fantasies of being extremely famous, but one friend is inestimably, indefinitely worth more than those fantasies. I have fantasies of being, again, a billionaire. We said that example, $1, 1 penny is worth more than that. I have fantasies of superhuman strength. Being able to do 1 push-up or even half a push-up from my knees is worth more than that. I have fantasies of being a super genius, reading 1 book, perhaps learning how to read. Right? Reading 1 line, 1 sentence is worth more than that. Right? I have fantasies of being a very, very good person. Just the superest saint that there is. But 1 little truly good deed, 1 truly honest thought, 1 little truly caring concern for another is worth indefinitely more than all those fantasies. So basically, that could be an attitude shift that might, perhaps, in some cases, help. Start focusing on what I actually have. Start focusing on the reality, small as it is and difficult as it is to win. And if I can succeed in changing my mindset to that, whatever I can get that's mine, no matter how hard it is, no matter how much I have to battle to make one little millimeter of progress, that is worth more to me than all of the fantasies, all of the could have beens and should have beens and would have beens in the universe. And if I can brainwash myself into that, then perhaps I would be willing to give up those fantasies, to stop making excuses that now I absolutely need for my emotional health, right? It's because of this or that. That's why I'm not the best. That's why I'm not successful. Perhaps then, and only then, I could give up those excuses and I could proceed down the path of real progress. Modest and difficult to win, as it certainly always is. So we can consider it. Thank you for listening.